Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Kim. I'll start by noting that this meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. Please always keep yourself muted when you're not speaking, and to keep the meeting on schedule, please wait your turn to speak and hold questions until the end of each speaker's presentation. If you wish to be recognized to speak, please raise your hand so that the chair can call on you. There is a chat function, but please remember that those who are calling in by phone cannot see the chat, and everything typed in the chat may be posted on the public meeting minutes. I'll do my best to verbally communicate relevant information that appears in the chat and would encourage folks to share pertinent information verbally rather than relying on the chat. For participants on the phone, press *6 to turn your microphone on and off to make a comment or a question. As a reminder, these meetings are public and are subject to the state's open meeting law. Under the state's open meeting law, all votes during an online meeting must be taken by roll call. This will require each member to activate their microphone to give their vote and then turn their mic back off. Finally, if at any time during this meeting you require technical assistance, please contact Kim Havey for help at kim.havey@minneapolismn.gov. Any questions on that portion? All right, I will now call this meeting to order and ask Kim to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum. Council members, when Kim calls your name, please say present, but also introduce yourself briefly with your name and organization is applicable. For any community members on the call, we will provide an opportunity for you to introduce yourself after the roll is complete.
Great, thank you. And I did want to say I'm just posting in the chat the link to the meeting tonight as well on the agenda, which does have the various links and presentations to the topics we're going to be talking about this evening. All right, so we'll get started with a roll. Just say present. Anna Bon Jenkins.
Present.
Max Dalton.
Present.
Indigo David Liu. Maren Demisi.
Present.
You. Mark Denon.
Present.
Tess Dornfeld.
Present.
Matthew Douglas May.
Present.
Sandy Fazeli.
Present.
Lauren Fleming.
Present.
Maddie Henderson.
Present.
Divine Islam. Leslie Jackson.
Present.
Anna Johnson.
Present.
Toya Lopez.
Present.
Barbara Lundy. Nick Minderman.
Present.
Aaron Niehoff.
Present.
Susan Savnik Hansen. She had mentioned that she may not be able to make it, but was going to try for first part. But Jacqueline Zapeta.
Present.
We have 15 commissioners present, and that is a quorum.
Excellent. Thanks, Kim. I also want to mention that our meeting tonight is being staffed by Kim Havey and Bjorn Olson of the City's Sustainability Division. Now I'd like to give an opportunity to community members and others, such as city staff and presenters who have joined us today, to unmute themselves and briefly introduce yourself with your name and organization as applicable. Go ahead.
I can go first. Hi everybody. I'm Zach Schultz. I'm with Councilmember Lisa Goodman, and just joining in to introduce myself to you all and let you all know that I'll be staffing her Clean Energy Partnership Board seat. So excited to work with all of you, and looking forward to the meeting tonight.
Thanks, Zach. Welcome.
Hi, and I'm Tashana Williams. I'm with Minneapolis Documenters, house with the Pillsbury United Communities, and I'll just be here taking notes for the community. And again, thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Tashana.
I can go. I'm Leah Hinneker with Hennepin County Sustainability Manager and here to present on the Hennepin County's Climate Action Plan.
Hi, Leah. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Chaman Salas, Director of the Climate and Resiliency Department in Hennepin County.
Hey, Diana.
Also,
Welcome.
with Leah. Thank you.
Good to see you. Anyone else? Do we have anyone calling in?
My name is Jack Levy. I'm a board member of the Kenwood Neighborhood Organization, and thank you for having me as a guest.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. Welcome. Okay. Anyone else? I think that was all. Great. All right. Moving on. We will proceed with our agenda. Thanks everyone for being here. Really appreciate it. A copy of the agenda was posted in the city's Legislative Information Management System, LIMS, which is available at lims.minneapolis.mn.gov, and Kim dropped that link in the chat. Our first two items of business is the adoption of our agenda for tonight's meeting, followed by the acceptance of minutes from the February 15th meeting. We can combine these two items of business if we receive a proper motion. A couple of changes. I'd like to ask if we could move Sandy's overview to the first presentation because she has to leave at 6. And I think it'll be just about 5 minutes or so. Does that work for our presenters?
That's fine with me from Leah from Hennepin County.
Okay. Thank you.
Thumbs up from Deanna too.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
With that, then I move to accept the minutes from last month and then also the agenda for today's meeting with the change that Anna suggested.
Thank you, Erin. I'm going to add another change, which is we forgot to include the Hennepin Avenue redesign letter adoption in the agenda. So,
okay.
I think does that motion count?
So with those two changes, I make that motion.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. Would anyone like to second?
I'll second that. Tess,
thanks.
I did want to just add one more thing. I did get an email from Tess. Yeah, just to if we wanted to take a little bit of time later in the agenda under the discussion, she had some things she wanted to bring forward. Would that be okay, Tess, to put that in?
I may need to leave at 6 as well.
Okay.
Just the roof depot update if we could do at the top.
Okay. Yep. Could do that. It should take only a minute.
Why don't we prioritize Tess, and then my thing isn't urgent, so we can just move that to next month.
Okay. That sounds good.
Okay, so we're not going to move so we're going to take
bump
Sandy's presentation off till April. Okay, but we'll still have a time to review the Hennepin Avenue redesign recommendations. Okay.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Tess. Do we need a renewed motion, or are we good for roll call?
Sounds like Erin's okay with those changes. So yeah, we just need to go through the roll call.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thanks. So just say yay or nay on this one. Hannah?
Yay.
Max?
Yay.
Indigo? Maron?
Yay.
Mark?
Yay.
Tess?
Yay.
Matthew?
Yay.
Sandy?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yay.
Maddie,
Yay.
Divine, Leslie,
Yay.
Anna,
Yes.
Toya,
Yay.
thank you. Barbara, Nick, Nick, are you there? Well, he was there a second ago. Aaron,
Yes.
Sorry,
and oh,
sorry you
ahead.
missed me. Yes, from Nick.
Okay, thank you. And Jacqueline.
Yay.
Okay. We have 15 yeas, so that motion for approving the minutes and agenda passes.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. Our first item on the agenda is the reading of our land acknowledgement. As we meet here today, we are reminded that Minneapolis is situated on the homelands of the Dakota people, an area that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. It is home to Indigenous people from more than 30 different nations. As a city, we have a responsibility to care for the land on which we live and work and all its natural surroundings. This stewardship is an integral part of our involvement in this commission, and we honor it as we begin our meeting. We now open the space to discuss ways in which that we can support Indigenous people in our community. And as of last meeting, we decided to broaden that and I think support not only Indigenous, but Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our community.
Yeah, there are actually a couple of film screenings. Well, one screening coming up tonight at 7 with Honor the Earth and a number of other organizations on line 3 and also line 5, and in general about the threats to the Anishinaabe way of life and in particular wild rice or monoman. So that's at 7 online. And I'll share a link for that. And then also, unfortunately, at 6 o'clock, TPT has a new documentary about the missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives crisis coming out. And they're having a discussion with the protagonists of the film. But then, of course, it'll be available, premiering on TPT on Monday. And then on a couple other times next week, and I assume will be available online. So I have some links for that I can drop in the chat this time.
Thanks, Tess. Appreciate that. Anything else? All right, well, thank you for that. So moving into our presentations, Kim, did you want to give an update on Roof Depot? Or was Tess gonna?
I think you just wanted to, I can give a real brief update. Last week at the council meeting, there was a motion that passed 8-5 by the council to stop the demolition of and the additional progress moving forward on the revised Roof Depot plan, which would take the majority of the site except for 3 acres, I believe, in the southwest corner. That was vetoed by the mayor, and so that did not pass. However, there was additional language as part of it, which delays the demolition until this summer and provides the East Phillips community and the others working on it until the end of June to come back with a proposal for potentially the whole site. So that's kind of where it's at right now. I haven't heard from others staff-wise or things as to what, if that, I mean, I think that basically puts everything on hold until, you know, that June 30th timeframe before there's any additional discussion on it.
Thank you, Kim. Any discussion on that? Yeah, Sandy.
Hey, thanks, Kim. Just curious what the mayor's rationale was for vetoing.
I have to reread, but if you put that in there, what I can do is I can send out the letter from the mayor that to everyone that was sent back to the council with the veto. I did read it. I don't have it right in front of me, unfortunately, so I don't recall.
Sure.
But how about I do that? Okay.
Thanks so much.
Lauren, thanks, Kim.
I know one of the big things was that like $14 million had been spent in planning on what was going to be done on that site. So I know that that was one of the pieces that the mayor wanted to figure out of how that $14 million was going to be repaid. Like, I don't know that anybody has an answer for that. It seems like a big hurdle.
Sunk cost. Tess?
Yeah, on that, my understanding is that as long as a water yard is developed, that the money doesn't have to be repaid. That's my recollection from the EPNI event. Obviously, that is a big sticking point that's come up over the past year plus. But my understanding was that there are still other sites where the water yard, where the same sort of thing could be implemented just in a different spot, and then it wouldn't have to be repaid. That was what I thought the case was.
I know that there is a tie to the water fund because that's where the funding was lent from. So there has to be a tie somehow to the use. Whether it has to be on this site or not, I think is up to folks to determine. But right, if there's then money's invested in the use related to improving the water system, it has a tie. If it's not related to that, then it would require repayment.
Got it. Any other discussion or thoughts or interest in SEAC actions around this for this month? Okay, not hearing any for the moment. Tess and Kim, thanks so much for bringing that. So we will now move into our guest presenters for the day. Jack Levy is a resident of Minneapolis who'd like to talk about reducing emissions from lawn equipment and landscaping equipment. Some of you may have read a Boston Globe article about what cities are doing on this topic. Jack is looking for support of his grassroots effort and suggestions for how to develop a city program and policy to phase out fossil gas in landscaping equipment. And Jack, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Anna. So, yeah, my background is in environmental science, and in the last 20 years, I have been developing both wind and solar systems. So I come from, a desire to reduce noxious gases and reduce both the noise and the air pollution levels. And I talked to a lot of people about noise in general in the city. And about 6 months ago, I came across a very interesting notice about, these gas blowers and how much noise they make and how bad they are for the environment. And there was no less than 200 responses. So that caught my attention, and I started talking to people in my general area of the uptown area, and thought that this might deserve some attention. It's one of those things that, of course, in light of everything else that's going on in the city and the world, may not seem like it may be of utmost importance, but if we let these things take their own lives, then we'll have to pay the price later. That combined with, as you all know, in addition to wind and solar, now battery systems are being introduced. And the fact is that I believe that within 5 years, we are going to switch to battery-powered blowers and lawnmowers and what have you. So the amount of emission that's going to happen in the next 5 years is really a shame for all of us. It's just a casualty that doesn't need to happen. So I'm prepared to put my own effort into this. We obviously need an action plan, which we started talking about, but I'm here to essentially present myself and my desire to do something about this in conjunction with whoever wants to be part of it.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I think this is a really important issue, and I think it's an environmental justice issue because the fumes that are emitted by this lawn care equipment are really just terrible for human health. And a lot of folks who work in the landscaping business are not getting paid very much, and likely larger proportion of BIPOC folks. So I appreciate you bringing this forward. Is there any discussion or questions for Jack?
I wondered if I could ask Bjorn on the spot here a little bit. Oh, he's got his hand up, because he did work in environmental initiative and had some familiarity with some previous programs in there. Maybe you want to share some additional information about this issue with us.
Yeah, thanks, Kim, and thanks, Jack. Thanks, everyone. Again, I'm Bjorn Olson with the City of Minneapolis Sustainability staff. Yeah, I mean, there is some tangible evidence and you know, programs that have existed in Minnesota that are focusing on this exact type of situation of replacing gas-powered lawn care equipment with electric alternatives. And the most predominant one, I guess, has been the grant program through the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency that began in 2018 and went through 2020. There's a current hiatus right now, and we don't know when those grants, if they will be coming out again or when they will be coming out again. But they've been wildly successful in terms of the number of projects, both within the metro and across the state, and also, you know, the amount of leveraged funding, and also the overall emission reductions. So, you know, when we're talking about, you know, what kind of pollution are we looking at reducing here? It's primarily volatile organic compounds, which turns into ground level ozone, nitrous oxides, and particulate matter, which is particularly horrible for you know, human inhalation. Those particles are so small that when you inhale them, they literally get transferred into your bloodstream. So that's the real nasty stuff. And really, these are the same kinds of, I mean, nationwide, you know, EPA wide, these are criteria pollutants of importance and of focus because of the disproportionate effects not only on climate and the environment, but on human health. So the PCA program basically provided a 50% match to replace old two-stroke landscaping and lawn equipment with battery-powered with a maximum ask of $24,000. It was open to businesses under 500 employees and governmental agencies, public entities, and things like that. There were over 100 in the kind of 2.5 years that it went. There were over 100 applicants or 100 grant recipients, $300,000 in grants that were spent, and yeah, I mean, some of the examples: Apple Valley, Eden Prairie cities, Bloomington Schools, Metropolitan Airport Commission. The vast majority of grant recipients were public entities. So, while that means that government is kind of doing its due diligence, I would highly suspect that when you talk about older, dirtier equipment that is running more hours and is going to be run until it literally falls apart, that opportunity still exists in the private sector to do this. So, while we don't have any sort of confirmation or certainty from the Pollution Control Agency that this opportunity will come around again, I would also note that the city of Minneapolis specifically has the Green Business Cost Share Program, which offers 45% of a grant match for pollution reduction projects up to $100,000. So, is there a need for this? Yes. Is there an opportunity for this? Yes. And have previous, programs shown that this is not only cost effective, but extremely effective overall in reducing sizable amounts of pollution? Yes. So I think there are a lot of opportunities here, but I'll cut myself off and leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Bjorn. That's helpful context. Would this qualify for a green cost share rebate, the replacement of gas-powered lawn care equipment with electric?
Yep, these pollution reduction projects are again the criteria pollutants that are prioritized throughout the city, but especially in green zones as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
great, thanks.
One
Aaron?
point
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I should raise my hand.
My question is just, does the business itself need to be based in Minneapolis or just serve Minneapolis customers?
So that's a great question, and it is on a project basis. So, they would, I believe, have to demonstrate that the impact area of the project would take place in Minneapolis. We could flesh out the details with our friends in the health department, but that's also something that we have control over that. I mean, it's our program, right? It's the city of Minneapolis. So I think that case could definitely be justified and definitely be made. And if we need to make a few tweaks, then that's, I think, something that would be a great recommendation to come from this group and something that we would have tangible levers of influence over.
Thanks. Kim?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to mention, that while we do have the eligibility to do that, we don't really have the program criteria or what have you of it as a program. So it's an eligibility, but we kind of have to look at a separate program. And there's some work that Jack has been doing, reaching out and working with Patrick Hanlon too. But yeah, any recommendations, suggestions for the scope of the work would be greatly appreciated from folks here.
And just because I'm not sure if it was mentioned, Patrick Hanlon is with the Minneapolis Health Department, for those who haven't heard that name before.
Thanks, Aaron. Jack, have you done research about what other cities are doing around this, and kind of have any ideas for additional policies beyond green cost share?
I've read the articles as they come through, and I guess I think of it as two strategies. One is the stick, the other one is the carrot. The stick, of course, is a ban, which is problematic, first of all, because it takes a long time, and secondly, because sometimes it's difficult to enforce. Other cities have taken the approach that if they can have things like grants and incentives and good education around this, as one of you mentioned, these are people who already are not making a lot of money, and here they are, they're closest to this. Yes, they put on ear protectors, but my goodness, sometimes they come in 2 and 3s, and somebody did a study as to how loud that is, and it's louder than it's close to a jet engine because it's additive. But the noxious fumes, nobody escapes those. So to answer your question is yes, I continue to read up on it to get some ideas, and my hope is to have anybody who has some ideas on the best strategy to implement this. I would love to talk to them, and I'll make myself available in coming weeks and months.
Thank you for that. Leslie?
Thank you. I just have a question. So this would be you would use this as a pilot, and it would be the city employees that would be using these lawnmowers, or is it the residents? Maybe I missed that. And then also, how long do they stay charged? And can you go in remote areas? Because I know that when, like, if the transportation, like in the highways and stuff, you see the people coming out mowing, and so how long would they stay charged? Is another question.
Well, thank you for the question. I could go on about that for quite a while, but in summary, the first target would be the service companies, because they are actually the biggest culprits. They work long hours and multiple devices, so then you have the concentration of 2 or 3 or 4 of these devices staying in one place for half an hour to an hour and a half. And but I did talk to somebody I know who's in the business, and asked him the question about if he thought about switching over to electric. The answer was he had, but he doesn't think it's possible because they work all days and these batteries don't last. Well, he's right, but he's also unaware of the fact that the prices of these batteries have come down. The manufacturers of these devices have been very clever about a quick replace. I mean, literally, it's what would be quick. Our phones and batteries, our phones and computers don't allow us to switch batteries anymore. But in the old days, well, it'd be like a flashlight from the old days, where it would take about 30 seconds to replace a battery, and then recharge the one that you are not using while you're using the other one. But it's getting to the point where you can actually have a battery last 2 to 3 to 4 hours, and if you had 3 or 4 of them, it would easily carry you throughout the day. And we are we're just making that transition with lithium-ion, where that is just possible. So in answer to your question, yes, that's very possible to go 8 to 12 hours with no problems on not a single battery charge, but a charge that you're carrying with you, and it weighs less than gasoline.
Nice, that makes sense. Thanks, Jack. Sandy?
Hi, thanks so much. This definitely sounds like a place where we might want to consider a SEAC letter of support. I'm curious, and maybe this is more for Bjorn and Kim, but if there were, could we suggest something along the lines of smaller, like, or less resourced businesses having an additional incentive through the green cost share program, or maybe businesses with more minority workers, just to help make sure that this is going to smaller or diverse owned businesses? Or is the field so small, like, is it just small businesses? So maybe it's a moot point.
I haven't done a lot of exploration on that. I mean, I think in what we're looking at now is sort of the commercialized businesses initially. So most of those are fairly small, but I still think we should make recommendations on, like you said, around that area. I know that they did make some priorities in rankings for the MPCA program based on where they were doing their work. If they were in environmental justice communities like green zones, they were ranked higher. So that could be part of the recommendations, but we're still in development right now. I know there's also a possibility that we could, work with local department stores, hardware stores, and potentially do this on a residence basis. It would be a little more, we'd have to kind of figure that one out a little bit more, but having some kind of point of sale rebate at some of our local hardware stores for electric replacement of fossil fuel, gas trimmers, weed trimmers, that kind of thing. But there's also the discussion too about encouragement of using, of planting lawns that require less use of equipment in general. So whether it's electric or not, you don't have to use it. So that would address, noise issues without replacement. But so any and all of those suggestions are definitely under consideration, and would be welcome to think about as we try to pull together a program on something like this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Kim. I think Mark had his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. First of all, I'm a big fan of electric replacements for gas landscaping equipment, and I've all of my equipment is electric now, or old-fashioned reel type lawnmowers. But I guess a question for the group. A personal observation of mine is that most of the crews that are doing landscaping tend to be in wealthier neighborhoods, as opposed to maybe the smaller homes, smaller yards where less wealthy residents reside. So it seems like it may be maybe misguided to provide financial incentives for those crews to change over, where maybe the stick effect might be better, and then the crews would have to replace equipment, but then pass through any additional costs to their customers. Again, it seems maybe misguided to direct funds to incentivize the greening of equipment for wealthier customers, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I think that does make sense. The one thing I'll point out though is I think the folks who are impacted firsthand are the ones who are using it also. But it's not
true.
just
The employees. Yes, that is true. I'm still thinking we'd want to replace them. I'm just thinking how we would go about it. And, I think more of a cost pass through to the customers might be more appropriate in this case than providing a financial incentive to replace that equipment.
Thanks. Yeah, that's well taken. Hannah?
Hi, yeah, I definitely hear and understand that comment, but I work in kind of incentivizing folks to take on projects that are voluntary, and very often they need that financial incentive in order to be motivated to do it. And there might also be a fear of losing business if they were to raise costs on those customers. So I would personally probably advocate for the carrot approach as well. The only other comment I wanted to make is just with the Green Cost Share program, ensuring that there are either organizations or if the city provides folks that will provide assistance in filling out those applications, just kind of knowing that that can be a big challenge to figure out how to fill out those applications, specifically if a business might have a first language other than English as well. So just wanted to put that out there. I would love to, hear if there are options for providing assistance to those who might want to apply through the Green Cost Share program.
Good question. Thanks, Hannah. Kim or Bjorn, do you happen to have that answer on hand?
I know that there is some limited help from staff to complete applications, but I would have to get back to you as to what level of support that is. I don't know, Bjorn, if you have you've heard anything on that.
So that will be necessary. I think there are some additional existing resources that the Green Business Cost Share already utilizes, and that includes there's a spreadsheet available that kind of crunches the numbers on what your equipment is, how often you run it, and what your emission reductions will be, which is a pretty easy kind of plug and play. But then there's also technical assistance provided by the University of Minnesota Technical Assistance Program. And the last time I checked, or maybe when I was working actually this is still ongoing because I've been in touch. The city also contracts with Environmental Initiative to do outreach, engagement, and kind of do that hand-holding process for projects that are interested in kind of getting that assistance to get across the finish line.
So again, that would be probably a good recommendation to include in there too, so that we've got that on the record.
Yeah, that sounds good. Just looking at the time, and I might propose that anyone who's interested, maybe we can kind of get together and do a little bit of research outside of SEAC, and then come at the next meeting or the meeting after that to propose a list of recommendations for policy or program ideas that might support faster adoption of electric lawn equipment. Does anyone feel opposed to that or have any concerns about that strategy? Cool. Okay, hearing none. Would anyone like to be a part of that group? And Jack, if we'd love to have you if you want to join too. We'd love to work with you.
Thanks.
Hey, Anna, I'm happy to be part of it.
Thank you, Sandy. Cool. I'm also.
Hey, Anna, I would like to be part of it as well. This is Marin.
Marin, awesome. Thanks, Marin. And I'm excited. Yeah, I'm happy to be a part of that too.
Sorry, and could the person who mentioned that they do like research in incentives at least maybe offer to review, do a pre-review or something? I forget who it was.
I think it was Hannah.
Yeah, sure. I would be more than happy to participate as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. And just want to note in the chat. Oh, sorry. Before I do that, anyone else want to join in? No pressure. Okay. And Marion had one more question about the plan for gas equipment and if there's any recycling of those parts. I feel like that's something we could also include in our research and recommendations. But at Jack or Bjorn or Kim, do you happen to know that?
All I know is that they have to be retired or decommissioned. I don't know if there are specifics about the manner in which that takes place.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I don't have any additional information to add on that, but again, could do some research. Jack, I don't know if you've seen or heard anything about that topic.
Commissioning?
Yeah, like what is, just is there, do they have to decommission it, meaning like recycle it, or is that not been looked at closely enough to know what happens to them?
Correct. It hasn't. It's a difficult question. The easiest thing to do, of course, is to just destroy them. So I don't have a quick answer.
No worries, we can look into that. Excellent. Well, thank you, Jack, for bringing this to us. Really appreciate it. Excited to work with you going forward. Any other closing thoughts or questions? Cool. All right. Well, with that, I think we're teed up for a presentation from Hennepin County on their climate action plan, which I know they have put a lot of work and time into it over the last, I don't know, took a long time, I think, because it was thoroughly vetted with, I think, every department in the county. So I will hand it over to them to talk about it.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. My name is Diana Chaman-Salas. I am the Director of the Climate and Resiliency Department, and I'm here with Leah Hineker. Do you want to quickly present yourself, Leah?
Sure. Hi, Leah Hineker, Sustainability Manager for Hennepin County Facility Services. And I put in the chat that Hennepin County does actually accept lawnmowers and will scrap metal replace them. So we should maybe partner with that aspect.
Awesome. So we briefly want to share our vision for our department and the work that we've been doing in the last year on the climate action plan, as well as some updates and some potential areas of collaboration. So as you may know, in May of 2021, the County Board adopted its first climate action plan to mitigate the effects of climate change and created the Climate and Resiliency Department. So our mission is to build a more equitable and resilient Hennepin County by reducing greenhouse gas emissions while engaging with communities that are vulnerable to climate impacts. And our Climate and Resiliency Department advocates for the responsible use of resources, minimizing wastefulness, and promoting renewable energy. So I don't know if some of you are familiar with this scenario planning. Through our climate action plan, Hennepin County committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 45% from 2010 levels by 2030 and achieving a net zero emissions by 2050, both in the county's operations and geographically. And as you can see in this wedge diagram, we are presented with scenario planning of how we could reach this emissions reduction goal countywide. The solid line across the top is a forecast of business as usual based on anticipated population and job growth forecasted to 2050. But the stars show the goals adopted by the county board and how they can help us reach our net zero by 2050, associated with specific actions. So to achieve this vision, our plan observes two key goals. The first one focuses on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and the second seeks to adapt and mitigate to the effects of climate change. But both of these goals share a disparity reduction lens. As you know well, there is a high correlation between socioeconomic vulnerabilities and the effects of climate change. In other words, lack of access to equitable transportation, housing, and health services are make communities more vulnerable to climatic change. So these are the foundational strategies that our staff and the people that were invested in the process of the climate action plan identified as the key baseline for our work. And so our plan touches nearly every facet of the work that we do, from strengthening community resilience to transition into renewable energy, reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, preventing food waste, building green infrastructure, and implementing carbon sequestration efforts. These 7 strategies, as I mentioned before, were identified by our staff as the best place to start our work, and we call them foundational strategies. So I wanted to share briefly some of the work that we've been working on to advance these foundational strategies. So we have implemented a small green jobs and tree canopy expansion project. We're currently developing a project with our tax forfeited land. So we are spearheading a pilot program meant to employ, train, and provide career pathways for youth that are currently in diversion or corrections, while planting 500 trees on county-owned tax forfeited land and other county properties. And we're also developing a tree canopy expansion in collaborations with potentially the city of Edina. We're hoping for confirmation this month to support the training of 24 youth coming from corrections that would be helping planting over 1,000 trees. We are also working with U of M on an urban agriculture youth program. This is meant to transform vacant urban lots into community gardens. And we are hoping to engage with over 30 youth and their families in North Minneapolis to promote urban agriculture farming. They would be provided training to become master gardeners, and they would be provided leadership skills. And this would be in partnership with U of M Extension. We're also working on supporting the anaerobic digester RFP that is ongoing, and this would be taking place in Brooklyn Park. We're also working on updating our VMT reduction goal. So we are currently overseeing a consultancy that will help us develop a baseline study, as well as a matrix of strategies to reduce VMT and scenario planning to assess the best way of achieving the most successful goal to reduce VMT at a county-wide level. And then I will also share a bit of our EV strategy further along this presentation, but I can share briefly that we've identified a green strategy for our internal fleet, and we are currently coordinating with some cities to hopefully facilitate a conversation about launching an EV car shared services and potentially EV infrastructure as well. So regarding progress on fleet electrification, beginning in 2018, electric and hybrid vehicles became more available. So to begin the transition to our fleet vehicles, we worked in partnership with U of M, and they completed an EV fleet conversion study for Hennepin County. So in 2021, the board solidified our direction in the fleet transition by establishing 2 key targets. The first one was to convert a minimum of 20% of the county's light-duty fleet vehicle to electric and 50% to hybrid by 2030. And then the second target is to achieve a net zero emissions by county fleet by 2050. So to date, we have about 4 EVs in our fleet and 51 hybrids. And by 2021, 30 light-duty vehicles were replaced with vehicles across 6 departments with new hybrids, and we reached over a 90-ton reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And we're also trying to expand our charging stations infrastructure across facilities. So one of the key goals of our climate action plan and a priority of public works is to improve resiliency of the built environment and protect natural resources. So we are supporting the expansion of a tree canopy with a number of initiatives. And the main one, I briefly spoke about the tax forfeited land project, but apart from that, I would like to share that to date, we're working on acquisition and restoration of conservation easements. And to this date, we have 780 acres that have been permanently protected or are in the process of protection. And we were able to leverage $150,000 of county funds for this work. Then getting to a zero waste future, as I mentioned before, we are investing as a county on an advancing an anaerobic digester to, you know, work on reducing emissions, but also using the organic waste with different purposes, including creating biofuel. And so for that, we're developing a zero waste future RFP. And then we're also trying to develop a prevention campaign for just preventing food waste and expanding food rescue. So I also wanted to point out the work that we're doing on the VMT. This is a map that our consultancy firm developed for us to assess where are the areas across the county that have highest VMT, so vehicle miles travel. As you can see, Minneapolis shows the highest amount, and that's understandable because it's the highest urban area within the county. But so at this point, we have a baseline, which is very helpful, and we're expecting to have a matrix of strategies to reduce VMT, and we are obviously considering diversity of strategies. So anything from you know, TDM to different resilient hubs, or any capacity that we could look into potentially investing on EV infrastructure deployment and so on. So I think that this would be an interesting piece of conversation in the future for you or for us. So I'd love to keep you updated on the process. Right now, we just have a baseline, but we will be looking into scenario planning pretty soon. And so I'll leave you with Leah now.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to touch base a little bit on some of our energy reduction goals that we have. And this probably isn't all exhaustive of what we're doing, but it's definitely a starting point, as we've just had our climate action plan approved for just over a year now. So as many of you know, we are already in the process and actually have already implemented an efficient buildings collaborative, and it does kind of model the same model that the city of Minneapolis does, where we're requiring large scale commercial buildings and multifamily buildings to disclose their energy use. And this is something that we do not have policy authority to require throughout the Hennepin County, but we do provide the technical support for cities to adapt that policy themselves. And so we're really trying to encourage cities within Hennepin County to make that step and pass that policy. We're looking to expand this in the future to include sustainable building policies and you know, building audits and other different aspects to try and encourage and incentivize buildings to reduce their greenhouse gases and their energy use. Some of the things that we're working on internally are our facility services department that manages and operates the majority of the Hennepin County buildings is looking to complete a building decarbonization study. What is it going to take to really reduce carbon in our buildings? How are we going to, you know, switch from electric to from natural gas to electric, or decarbonize our natural gas uses? And so we're going to be looking at strategies to complete that through Hennepin County's organization, and then also be probably expanding that in the future to include ways that we can decarbonize buildings throughout the county as a region. And then we are looking to, we've had an energy plan for the last 8 years for our facility services buildings, and you know, with the new goals that we have established through the climate action plan, we're going to update that to align with that. So that's happening this year. And we have and always have followed the B3 guidelines for most of our building development. And so we're going to continue to do that and actually look to see if we can expand on that, and even look to prioritize net zero buildings in the future when we reconstruct them. And then I think a lot of people know about our energy plant that we have the Hennepin County Energy Center, downtown Minneapolis. It does supply a majority of the buildings that Hennepin County owns and operates there with steam and chilled water. We're going to look at strategies and create a plan to decarbonize that. So we'd like to have that building carbon neutral in the future. And so that's going to be a pretty big undertaking. And all these things here are really going to contribute to our key metrics that we have identified in our climate action plan, 2 of which Diana already mentioned, which is a 45% reduction of greenhouse gases by 2030, carbon zero by 2050, and then carbon neutral electricity by 2035, and a 3% annual reduction goal in our energy use for our buildings is an ongoing metric that we have every year. Next slide. So obviously, going to renewable energy is one of our key aspects in trying to reduce our greenhouse gases. We have a new solar installation coming on board, hopefully this year in 2022. It's a ground mount system. It's a fairly large one going on at our adult correctional facility. It's going to be ground mount. We have invested in quite a bit of community solar gardens, trying to promote the grid to be more clean energy. We are looking to update all our solar assessments. We've done solar assessments on almost all our buildings at the county, and we need to update that and look for opportunities to put more solar on our buildings, especially when we update our roofs and replace our roofs. Those are the perfect time to put solar on them. So we're looking to do that this year. And we're always looking to evaluate different purchasing opportunities, either virtual power purchase agreements with different developers, or investing in green tariffs with our utility companies. And we do have a regional metric to try and reduce, or try to provide 10% on-site solar by 2030. We're going to try and do that internally on our operation on our buildings too. That's a goal that we are looking to meet, to try and increase the use of solar on buildings. Yep, next slide. So another key thing that we're doing here internally for Hennepin County operations is we recognize that landscape and green infrastructure is kind of a very key aspect to preserving the environment. And so we've had a sustainable landscape plan for a while, but it definitely needs to be expanded to include more than just native plantings and other things like that. But we are looking to update our sustainable landscape plan for our buildings, really focusing on water management, from stormwater management, but then also looking at ways that we can better use less irrigation, with different plantings and obviously you can see on here cisterns and things like that. Really looking at green infrastructure, how can we really reduce the heat island effect with green infrastructure, really trying to capture some of that water on site, repurpose it. One of the things that we're doing a lot more of and really trying to focus on this year is, how do we incorporate and actually preserve carbon sequestration on our facilities, on our properties, and how can we expand that and really try to maximize our opportunities that we have for carbon sequestration, and what those metrics might be and what those goals might be for the future. And then I think everyone's getting a really good taste of what freeze thaw means. Here comes spring in Minnesota, but this is going to become a bigger and more pertinent issue for us. And we really like to try and reduce the freeze thaw effects, the impacts on our buildings, the use of salt, the use of machinery that takes to mitigate that. And so we're going to look at how we can better landscape our buildings and better provide green infrastructure to mitigate those freeze thaw effects. So we're really looking to reduce these impacts of climate change on our county facilities in the future. And I see this as something that possibly could lead to community-wide guidelines that we hopefully could help support cities within Hennepin County to do the same. All right, next slide.
Thank you, Leah. Yes, so we also wanted to share a bit of the management that we've been taking, and really we want to leverage the capacity to use data to help us assess priorities and capacities and opportunities. So we are in the process of developing a task flexible GIS hub to use as a planning tool to assess vulnerability across communities. And so what you're seeing here is an example, and honestly, the origin of this project, which is our climate change vulnerabilities map, which is taking data from the CDC SBI. But we're also co-designing different dashboards. Actually, Leah, that's here today, developed a greenhouse gas emission Power BI dashboard to assess internal annual carbon emissions. And I think we have data coming back from 2005 all the way to today. So that's really helpful to help us understand where we need to do better at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But then we're also thinking of leveraging different sources of data that we have across the county, such as the IoT smart technology managed by IT. And then we also have access to the Mesonet that emergency management services provides. And I haven't made a slide for this, but I quickly want to mention that we also want to be very thoughtful in how we communicate and engage with communities, particularly communities that are, highly affected by the effects of climate change. So BIPOC communities, low-income communities. And for that, we'll also include 2 community liaisons within our Climate and Resiliency department, and they should be joining us hopefully around May. And their work will really help us assess how we should be coordinating and engaging and learning from the capacities of the communities that we seek to serve. So with that, I thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, Leah and I are here to respond. We're looking forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Really appreciate your time being here tonight. Let's see, I think we've got Tess's hand up, and then we can clarify the VMT map after that.
Yeah, a few questions that I'll just throw them all out. And if you can't keep track, I can come back to them. On the sort of graph of the different strategies, I noticed that sequestration was a pretty significant portion, and you talked a little bit about some of that. I was just wondering if all of that is planned to be the sort of tree planting and ecologically based sequestration strategies. That's question number 1. On the EV fleet, I was just wondering, you gave some great numbers, but didn't say what the total number is. So it's a little hard to assess how much that is compared to the full fleet. On the conservation easements, I was wondering if you have plans or criteria for how those are distributed throughout the county. And then on the goal of sending no waste to landfills, I assume that that doesn't include HERC. So just wanted to clarify that. So sequestration, fleet, conservation easements, and landfilling. Thanks.
I could take the carbon sequestration one, Deanna. So like I said, we are just in the beginning stages of trying to even figure out how we're going to approach carbon sequestration. And so the easiest ones are obviously, planting more trees and, doing that type of stuff, but I don't think that's going to get us all the way. So I think we're going to look at expanding technology. I know we've looked at, different ways to capture carbon in, boiler exhaust, but, with boilers going to electric, that's probably not going to be a good idea. So I think we're going to be open to opportunities and, opportunities to partner with City of Minneapolis to evaluate different strategies. But this is just a starting conversation at this point in time on carbon sequestration. So yeah, I don't think we have all the answers quite yet.
If I could just follow up on that. So that projection of how much of the reduction will come from sequestration, is that sort of a goal or like an idea of what might be feasible, or how is that proportion calculated?
Well, I think basically the way I understand it is that we've identified through the other strategies ways that we're going to be able to achieve our net zero. Carbon sequestration is a little bit more gray in that one, as we're still kind of trying to figure all those out. But I think that portion of it is more or less kind of what's remaining based on the things that we've already identified. And that was put together by a consultant, so I could probably go back and find exactly what numbers they used. But my understanding is that they kind of verified that number based on what was remaining out of the other strategies left to meet that carbon zero by 2050, and thought that we could do that with carbon sequestration.
Yeah, and maybe I can respond to the question about fleet services. So the county has a total amount of units of 710 units on its internal fleet. So really the projection is that by 2030, we should have 250 electric units and 160 hybrid units. Right now, we have less than 20 hybrid units and less than 10 electric units. So that's part of the work. And then regarding to your question on HERC, yes, I don't think that we are assessing for that. And that's also something that doesn't fall within my purview, unfortunately. That's something that is overseen by an Energy and ENE, Environment and Energy Department.
I think had been a question earlier about the VMT map and kind of like clarifying the heat map and whether like the city, just kind of clarifying the scale, and if it looks like there's lower VMT in the city of Minneapolis, but then there's a question about per capita miles. So if you could just clarify that, that'd be great. Thank you.
What's the question?
Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Would you like me to jump in, Anna, to clarify, since
Please, thanks, Nick.
Put the question in? So on the VMT per capita map, I think it was like slide 10. You made a comment saying that the VMT in Minneapolis was highest, but then looking at the scale, it looks like that dark color is actually the low end of the scale. And I just wanted to make sure that I understood whether it was high or low. And I think maybe a comment that I think it's usually a better data visualization practice to not make the desirable behavior look the worst on the map, if it is in fact that Minneapolis is the lowest. And not just Minneapolis, but there's also in Plymouth and Eden Prairie, there's a couple spots too that have lower VMT, but that purplish reddish color makes it look worse, just people's natural tendency.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that you're right. So it's actually the opposite. And that makes sense because these are the most, the further areas apart from more urban areas with access to BRTs or LRTs. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Nick. Leslie?
Oh, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. So I have just a couple questions. One is about your fleet. Are any of those trucks out of the 710, or are they just regular vehicles like cars and SUVs? And then the other question is, because you're looking at food scrap waste, I saw that. My question about that is, are you thinking and considering getting the food waste from schools, public schools, to do a collection on that? And besides businesses, now that, we're trying to get in a transition of being lifted from the virus. And I was just wondering, and I did notice you had an incentive for residents to start doing organic waste. Thanks. Kudos to that. Thanks. So those are my two questions. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, so just to clarify on the fleet, so that includes light duty units, so cars, SUVs, pickup trucks, and then there's also access to ambulances, which I think will begin to be changed into hybrid starting 2030. So yes, so the fleet is quite varied. And then regarding your point on the zero waste work, this is a piece of work that is being led by Environment and Energy, and I believe that right now we're in the process of developing an RFP and finding a consultant firm that will help us assess that strategy. And truly, I think that the work is meant to be done with community, so we'll most likely coordinate with community-based agencies, municipalities, and school districts.
I can add a couple things to those too. We did work with Excel Energy to get a fleet study done of all our cars and our fleets, and we used, you know, the GPS trackers, and we actually evaluated if we had the right size vehicles and the right vehicles for that particular activity. And so we've actually reduced some of our vehicles from bigger vehicles to smaller vehicles if it was possible, and, you know, decided if we needed, you know, the F-250s or the F-150s. So we actually went through the process of actually right-siding our fleet already. So hopefully, even with that process, we'll hopefully be reducing some, you know, emissions from making sure we're right-siding our fleet. So I think that was really actually very helpful for us to go through that study. And if anyone hasn't already done that, I highly recommend that.
I got
and I know
another.
that.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna, I know that our organics and recycling staff have already been working with the schools to collect some of their organics. I don't know if they're actually doing a full, I would assume that that would extend to, you know, like leftover food and stuff like that, getting thrown into the recycling or the organics recycling. But I know they've already been working a lot with the schools within Hennepin County to start doing that process and getting schools up to speed on that and getting some recycling, organic recycling put in there. So I know that's already on our radar screen.
Thank you. I forgot the other question.
Sorry.
It's okay.
If it comes to you, let us know.
And just to clarify too, the climate action plan has been implemented, I would say on parallel with a lot of different work that is happening across the county, and part of it is also understanding what's on the ground. So to the point of the zero waste work, that was ongoing, same with the anaerobic digester. And so the food rescue plan is part of it as well. And there are some ongoing really cool projects like the Priceless Produce program that is in coordination with different, I think, companies. So it's also to try to divert food waste into a source of energy. So that's the reason why we're developing the anaerobic digester. But yeah, so there's a lot of pieces moving.
Oh, I know the question was, what are you doing with the cars or the vehicles once you retire them? Are you selling them, or where are they going? Are they getting dismantled? So that's a question that I have with everybody when we're going into this electrification and decarbonization, is about the waste that we're collecting and where is that going? And that's the question I had.
My understanding is that we lease all our vehicles. I don't know about the big ones, but we lease everything. So they would go back to the leasing company. You know, that's maybe a good question for us to circle back with what happens there, but I think they get put back out on the market.
So doesn't that kind of counteract what you're doing as far as your goal to cut it down, but then the same vehicles that you're upgrading in this space, but you're putting back the same vehicles that you're trying to change. So it's kind of like you're still, it's not even changing because the vehicles that were changed. Am I saying it right? So I have this vehicle.
I get where your point is. That might be something we should circle back with them and find out what they're, you know, what's happening there. You know, I think the biggest draw here is just to make sure that there's less demand for those gas guzzling cars, and that's a community action that we all need to, you know, be a part of, is to see if we can get less demand for those in general. But yeah, I think that's a good thing to circle back with.
I think one of the effects of putting them back is it sort of has a domino effect, and it pushes out the the oldest, least fuel efficient cars on the market and replaces them kind of one by one. But I have a follow-up question about fleets. And that just feels like some of the lowest hanging fruit, and also it's super cost effective to purchase electric vehicles. And the goal of, like, I forget what it was, if it was like 30% by 2030 EVs, strikes me as like kind of low, considering that it's just like a cost effective and quite a jump in emissions reductions with every electric vehicle. So I'm curious if there's room to be a little bit more ambitious with that, and to, especially with light duty vehicles, just bypass purchasing hybrids and go straight to electric. And if there's like an opportunity to, and sort of willingness within the department to recognize those benefits and not stick exactly to the goals of the plan if they can do better than that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of energy too, but there are some more structural barriers. So, and I will go ahead and respond without having the expert here. That would be Jay Baldwin from transportation. But I think that he would probably say that the main issue is that supply is still limited, and there's a whole line of different agencies and municipalities waiting for supply. And then that creates delay. So I know that we're waiting right now for cars at this moment for vehicles, and that's also related to limited charging infrastructure that is also delayed. So I think that's the main issue. And then with maintenance concerns, I think the uniqueness of electric models and powertrains and the cost to replace battery components. So we need people that are equipped to be ready to maintain the EV charging stations and the new equipment. So that might take a little more on preparing staff for that piece. And that could also be an opportunity for green jobs in the future. But that might take a little longer. And then in addition to your question, so you're probably aware of the Levy program and the upcoming infrastructure bill that is focused solely on EV cars and EV charging infrastructure deployment. So we are currently coordinating with a cohort of cities through CEN, the Community Energy Network. Is that right? And GPI. So we've put together a number of cities to talk about this and facilitate the access to these services, because some of these cities are really excited and I think they're really energized, and some of them even have funding to buy EV charging stations. But we want to coordinate so that we don't, create more barriers and increase disparity. Someone said at some point in this meeting that there's fear of increasing disparities and not having the right people at the table, and not providing support to cities that may not have resources and sustainability directors, for example. So that's part of the other piece of our work that I maybe didn't include in the slides, but it's really important too.
That sounds good. Thank you. Bjorn?
I think Tess had her hand up before me, but I don't know if that was lingering from before.
Tess, did you have another question?
Sorry, yes, buttons got stuck. Yeah, following up on that, maybe you said this too, but in terms of, in general, making electric vehicles, lowering the barrier to adoption, would the charging infrastructure that the county is implementing, would that be publicly available? I mean, I know you want to, I'm sure, make sure that your own vehicles can get charged, but if we're investing in charging infrastructure anyway, making that something that the public can access would be a huge step to lowering public adoption of electric vehicles. And then I was going to just ask these as you're going through the slides, but I didn't want to interrupt. Was still wondering on the conservation easements. Certainly that is a big step for carbon sequestration and a good strategy, but in terms of the distribution of where those are implemented can have other impacts. And I was wondering what sort of plans you have around that. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so actually we have, if you read the climate action plan, there's a huge goal of planting 1 million trees by 2050. And so to do that, we've been coordinating with different entities, including U of M, to help us develop a roadmap. And so one of the key things that our foresters developed was a really cool GIS map to assess areas of priority based on where are those communities of interest, so with climate vulnerable communities. So we're now looking at different areas and mixed with the tax forfeited land. I think that would be a good way to start. But then there's also, you know, as you know well, access to land and who oversees the land is really key to be able to use it. So much of that work will be in coordination with cities. We're currently communicating and coordinating with over 10 cities to see how we can leverage their land for for tree canopy expansion. But then we're also looking at potentially studying urban forests so that we can use that space for tree canopy expansion in areas of vulnerability. So I don't know if that responds to your question. I wish I could say we do have a 1 million tree roadmap, but we're in the process of developing that.
That's helpful, thanks.
Bjorn?
Thanks.
Did we address your question about lowering the barrier for adoption on EV vehicles? I just wanted to make sure we got that one too.
Did not. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, and Deanna, you can take this on, but I know we're looking to evaluate what charging station infrastructure is needed in Hennepin County as a region and make sure that we make it equitable and evenly distributed throughout the county. And that has been something that has been a priority for Hennepin County, I think, for quite a while, is to make sure that we're not just putting in charging stations just because, but because, you know, try to create some sort of strategic roadmap for putting them in so that they're evenly distributed. So I think our goal is to evaluate, you know, where they're needed and how we can lay that out. And I think that's a task for us that we'd be working on here in the near future. And, you know, hoping to partner with cities within Hennepin County to make sure that that is a successful plan in the future.
Great, thanks.
Bjorn?
So first, am I allowed to ask a question? I know I'm not part of like the commission or
Go for
anything.
it, yeah.
I don't want to overstep. Okay. Thank you. So I was looking at slide number 3 and kind of the overall line graph of the net zero by 2050. And I know that these are all flexible and they're going to kind of change as technologies are adapted and different things take off and things like that. But I was intrigued by the light blue local renewable energy, which is like the 4th down from the top. And it looks like starting around kind of like 2035, 2040, it's kind of getting squeezed out. And I'm just wondering if there was like kind of a storyline behind that, because I know that, you know, local renewable energy generation is a big proponent of what we're doing in Minneapolis, not only, you know, to reduce our emissions, but also the equity component related to that. So I'm just wondering if there's, you know, a conversation there.
Yeah, and that's primarily due to our utility companies' drive to provide clean electricity. So obviously, once they meet their goal of providing carbon neutral electricity, there's going to be less need for us to put solar on, you know, individual houses and distributed solar. So I think if we want to, you know, if we really want to get out there and put solar on now's the time to do it, because I think the need from the utility for us to have distributed solar is going to become less and less of a need as they invest in more and more large scale renewable energy sources. So I think it is kind of a critical time for us to maximize that opportunity now before the opportunity is gone. And we're already seeing that. You know, the utility companies don't really want to support community solar gardens. They would rather support big, large scale utility wind source farms and, you know, those type of things. And so we're already seeing the utility companies really want to squeeze out these smaller distributed solar systems. But I think that they're part of the mix, and I think they're a valuable asset to the community. And I think that we want to, you know, continue to invest in them. So that's why you're seeing that become less and less of a viable option, is because I think we're going to see the utility company become carbon neutral in the future, and less of a need for on-site solar.
Maren?
Yeah, my question is kind of going back to the charging stations. I think you talked about partnering with some of the cities. I was just wondering, are you partnering with some of the existing infrastructure, whether that's ChargePoint, EVgo, or the Tesla superchargers?
Yeah, I mean, you can take that one or I can take it. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're just starting the conversation with the cities. So we haven't gotten to coordinate with any charging station agency. I don't know if you want to add anything else, Leah.
Yeah, we haven't. I don't think we've opened up those doors quite yet. I think we're looking to partner with the utility companies that are providing the infrastructure for a lot of these charging stations, and then, you know, recognizing that there's a competitive market out there that needs to be maintained. So we don't want to, you know, sole source charging stations, but then also looking to see if there's ways to maximize that, and, you know, the benefit that it brings to the owners of these charging stations, and, you know, do they want to be, you know, more or less considered a developer of these opportunities. So I think that's going to be down the road, and opportunity that we'll be able to partner with them. That's a good point.
I have a question about the building section and sustainable buildings policy, which I didn't see listed as a strategy, but Minneapolis has one or two. I know they're working enterprise and separate sustainable building policy, and, you know, St. Paul, Northfield have policies around if an entity receives more than like $200,000 of support from the city, they require either SB 2030 standards or just higher energy standards. And is that part of the county's plan to make sure that the buildings that they're supporting and helping to build in the county are then going to be able to meet these ambitious climate goals?
Well, the goal is going to be similar to the Efficient Buildings Collaborative, and the fact that we don't have legislative policy to provide policies to the cities. So we can support the cities by providing by taking down the barriers that they have to actually implement sustainable building policies. And so what we're really trying to do is just try to make it easier for cities to adopt those policies, because we don't have the legislative authority to actually require cities to do that. So we do have that limitation as a county, but we do have a big role in the fact that we can provide, you know, support in programs and, you know, possibly even some financial incentives and stuff like that to the cities, you know, as we're working through trying to incentivize some of these, you know, policies and these movements throughout the cities, really trying to focus on some of the underserved cities. I mean, we're going to be looking at different ways to strategize and getting them on board with, you know, passing policies and really trying to move the needle on building efficiency.
Thank you I appreciate that. Was that?
Did that help? Hopefully
it did. Yeah, but I am also curious if it never occurred to me for a county itself to adopt a sustainable building policy, and if that's, like, you know, jurisdictionally an option. I know that you have to match state level building codes in general, but
yeah. I think the limitation, the jurisdictional limitation would be that we can only implement that in our own operations, which is essentially what we're doing. And we're actually going a step forward with the Efficient Buildings Collaborative by coordinating with cities.
Yeah. I think the role that we might play is helping to support a statewide adoption of some sort of sustainable building code or stretch code. And there's been a lot of that going through the legislation right now. And I think I see that we could, play a voice in that and, hopefully try to encourage something like that to be a future option for cities from a legislative standpoint. I think that would be great. Otherwise, yeah, we'd have to support our sustainable building policy is more support sustainable building policies versus adopt a building policy. So I can clarify that with more of a support of citywide sustainable building policies, if that helps you at all.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, that was maybe not phrased right. So
no, I hear you.
And that's just something that we're working on. That hasn't been established yet. So that's a goal that we're trying to achieve and work on and expand with some of the work that we're doing with partnerships with the cities.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. In my daytime job, I work for an organization that advocates for building policies at the legislature. So I will follow up with you to talk about helping to advocate there.
Great.
Yeah. I also would be remiss not to ask about the HERC and plans for that. I know it's only technically, I think it's like either 1 or 3% of emissions, but it's of great environmental justice concern for the community and citywide in Minneapolis. Just would like to hear how you're talking about it at this point in time, and if there's a plan to decommission anytime soon.
That we could be opening up a can of worms here, but I think we're looking to see to verify our impacts on the greenhouse gases and look to see what's more impactful, closing down HERC or sending waste to a landfill. And I think we're making sure that we want to try and maintain that and do those evaluations and make sure we're accurate on that before we make any conclusive decisions on how to move forward with any of the HERC. That speaking from people that aren't here, unfortunately. So I'm trying to be as sensitive to that situation as I know that we need to be, because I know it's a very controversial situation.
Yeah, so I think the conversation of decommissioning HERC is pretty early at this point. Actually, today during the board briefing, there was support for actually creating pathways for people coming in and working and bringing some diversity within jobs for the HERC. So I don't have much information, but we can bring some information back if that's helpful.
I have a question about that, because I understand that's not your area, but have you heard of talks of changing the air monitoring in that facility because of the burning of the plastics? And then I'm gonna leave it right there. That's it. But I know that's not what you guys do, but I was just wondering, because of not decommissioning it, maybe monitoring it properly with the things that are being burnt. That's my thing. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not the expert on that. I've seen some of the reports. My understanding from the experts that operate that plant that we're monitoring it, but I'm not the expert on it, so I probably could not speak and answer your question accurately. So but my understanding is that we are monitoring it, and it's actually been reported to the PCA, and we do that on a regular basis, and that data is available publicly, and that's something that you could look at and evaluate if you need to. But I guess I can't speak 100% to all the different ins and outs of the emissions for that building right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any other hands up, and this might be a good time to move to the Hennepin Avenue redesign, but I want to give one last opportunity to ask a question before we bid our presenters adieu. All right, well, hearing none, Deanna and Leah, thank you so much for being here and letting us dig into the details of the plan. We really appreciate it and appreciate your engagement and reaching out, and I look forward to being in touch going forward.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
All right. And okay, last on our agenda is the Hennepin Avenue redesign letter. I think folks, thank you to Aaron and Matthew, and I think Nick for getting that all together and spearheading that effort. I will pull up the link to the Google Doc unless anyone has it.
Yep, I have it. I just put it in the chat.
Appreciate it. Oh, wait, mostly Matthew for the content. Are there any concerns or questions? Matthew, do you want to say anything about it before we take a motion to adopt it and send it?
No, I guess just want to say thanks to Sandy and Tess and a few others for all the comments and edits. So yeah, I don't know, unless folks have questions about it, I'm happy to move forward.
Sounds good. Any other questions or discussion at all? All right, sensing none. Would anyone, Aaron recommended sending our pass letter in addition to this one. So I think we'd be looking for a motion to send this letter, this Google Doc letter, in addition to our previous one. Does anyone want to make that motion?
I'll motion.
Thanks, Matthew. Any seconds?
I'll second. It's Lauren.
Hey, Lauren, thank you. Kim, can I pass it to you?
Yes, you can. Okay, we'll just do a run through, yay or nay on the motion to send the recommendations from the most current Hennepin Avenue South redesign, and also our pass letter in addition. So, Hannah.
Yay.
Max.
Yay.
Maron.
Yes.
Mark.
Yay, and I thought it was very well written, so thanks everybody.
Tess.
Yay.
Matthew.
Yay.
Sandy has left. Lauren.
Yay.
Maddie.
Yay.
Leslie.
Yay, and I agree with Mark. It was well written. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna.
Yay.
Toya.
Yay.
Barbara. Barbara, are you with us there?
Looks like she might be frozen.
We'll come back. Nick.
Yes.
Jacqueline.
Yay.
Aaron.
Yes.
Barbara, are you able to give us a yay or nay? Looks like she is frozen up there. But we do have 14 yays, so that motion carries.
Great. Awesome. Well, yes, thank you again to Matthew and crew for making that happen. I will send that along. I'm looking at my script. Tess, you have your hand up?
Yes, I just found a note to myself about the Community Connections Conference that is now planned for May 21st. And the deadline to apply to participate is April 1st. And I wanted to bring up whether SEAC would be interested in doing that.
Yeah, Tess, do you mind saying like a little bit more about the Community Connections Conference? Is that the Green Zone Summit?
Yeah, do you
No,
mind?
this is a
So actually, what's happening is the Green Zone Summit is happening as part of the Community Connections
Oh, it
Conference.
is.
So if SEAC is going to be participating, I think it would be good to join in with the Green Zone Summit as opposed to having like our own table.
Got it.
Is my recommendation.
Okay.
And maybe Leslie, you've been pretty involved in the from the north side anyway on the green zones. Is there any further information you can share about that?
Well, as you know, we have a new Vista volunteer, and she's been organizing the agenda, and it's kind of complicated. But moving off of that, I was going to reach out to Anna and Aaron, because they both said that they would help with the wordage to make sure that it's proper for the contest that I've created for billboards. So I was awarded 2 billboards for the green zones. I'm using one of them for a contest for the youth for the ages of 18 to 14, what environmental justice means to them, and have it a billboard contest. Someone donated $500 for the first prize. Also, the Sierra Club, what I thought for all the contestants was to create a Minneapolis North Side Green Zone environmental coloring book for the contestants to have their work put in the coloring book with maybe the Civil Rights Amendment, Clean Air Act Amendment, these different laws and entities in there to create the first coloring book for those that didn't win. So that's my role in it. And we're also going to blast it on the radio stations. We do have a little money, and we're debating which radio stations to put on. KMOJ, iHeartRadio, we talked to them, and several other ones. But I've created a communication group, and it seems like I'm the only one on there. The Vista Angela was helping me, but I'm redoing it and making it more detailed so people don't expect the city to take over their thing or all the other little intricacies that go into artists' minds as this moving process. So I'll be reaching out to you what I have so far, and hopefully that you guys can help me put it in a nice wordage that it's city friendly for the green zones, because we are an entity under the city, and be respectable for the community. And I appreciate you ladies for saying that you would help me in this, but looking forward to having this be something different for the first time and see how it goes. But I'm just excited about the billboards and getting the youth input into what they feel environmental justice means to them. So thank you for your help.
That is so cool. I'm excited about that. Tess, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, so that all sounds fantastic. My impression is that the Community Connections Conference is more of an exhibition than like what you might typically think of as a conference, where all sorts of entities have a booth and basically people come and see them and talk to them. So I'm not clear exactly how that fits in with the Green Zone Summit, and whether like how that interacts with the what's called the conference, but that seems to be, at least, just seeing the city's emails and looking at the website, and the exhibition application is just to like have a presence in the conference hall.
Okay, so it's going to be the big hall, and then the green zones is next door where the J is. So when you come in, depending on the street, so you'll come to the conference, and I mean to their conference, but right next door, the Green Zone Summit, and they'll have breakout rooms in there. So we're going to be having breakout rooms and do an introduction of the green zones and have a couple of speakers, but we'll basically have breakout rooms. So we're kind of next door to them. But we've also hopefully invited people that are nonprofit, so everybody has a voice into this. So it was supposed to be a collaboration of all the nonprofits, environmental justice groups in the city, so we know who's who. So out of this, I hope to gain a community directory of who's who, so people know who's who in our environmental fight here. So we're kind of connected. They wanted to partner with us, so we're next door to each other. So we're kind of intertwined. So we'll be meeting tomorrow, and I could send we can send you the link to get in, and maybe I'll reach out to Kelly to send it to you guys, or send it to Erin, and she can touch with everybody that might be interested in participating. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Leslie, is that the meeting to plan the Green Zone Summit is happening tomorrow?
Yes, it is. That's
okay, cool. Yeah, that would be great if I might have that in my inbox. But if anyone is interested in participating in that, I think that would be great for SEAC members to join, if anyone's able to.
It's bigger than what we planned. It was just supposed to be a little bit of thing, and next thing you know, it's bigger than what we planned.
Awesome. So I think is the question still out there if we want to have a table at the Community Connections Conference? Am I interpreting that correctly?
Can I provide some background on it? Yeah. So we have had a table in the past, and I would say that it's not necessarily the most helpful for SEAC itself to be tabling. I have found more success when we've been with like the sustainability division or, some other division of the city, so that, that we're also with city staff, people who are able to connect with people on a daily basis around some of these topics. It's helpful to have a presence just so people know that we exist. But in terms of actually being helpful and providing something during the conference, I feel like being partnered with the sustainability division has worked better in the past. I'm also just, I guess, reflecting on what SEAC has done in the past. We haven't gotten a lot of volunteers to sit at a table like that. And so just recognizing that so many of us had already been talking about participating in the Green Zone Forum, I just was concerned about having enough people for both.
Yeah, sure. That's a good point.
So I shouldn't have shot down the idea right away, Tess, but I think that those are where my main concerns are coming from.
That makes sense.
That sounds good. I just wasn't clear on what was exhibiting and what was being an event. But it sounds like you guys know what the deal is with that.
Nick, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that there is actual conference content that there's nothing posted about it yet. At least in the past there has been. Usually it's like 4 tracks. It's very much focused on neighborhood efforts. So there'll be, there might be a track talking about housing and public safety. There might be a track talking about transportation and sustainability issues, things like that. And then it's usually a combination of city staff and neighborhood associations and other folks that are presenting that work. But then, Tess, your perception is not wrong, that there's also a very huge focus on the exhibition. But it's the point of the exhibition is really kind of like a get to know everything the city can do for you kind of thing. It's dominated by city departments and nonprofits that provide services in specific parts of the city and things like that. So it's not a bad place for us to have some presence, but as Erin noted, a table by ourselves is probably not the best use of anybody's resource. And I don't know if they're space constrained or not for tables. Maybe some years they are, but this year might not be.
They haven't seemed to be in the past. Every time that we've done the Community Connections Conference, which has been, you know, I think twice prior to the pandemic. So prior to 2020 or prior to 2021, we participated, and it hasn't been like much of a problem. But I think the additional thing that I had wanted to add is, like, as an example, just adding on to what Nick had been saying in terms of the the other sort of more conference-y type things that happen during the conference besides the exhibition. Like in past years, they've had a conversation about Upper Harbor Terminal and had those conversations at like small groups at different tables with council members and stuff. So I'm not sure, you know, what the plan might be this time around, especially with the shorter term that most of the council members have. All the council members have right now.
Got it. Cool. This is all really helpful context. Kim, you want to jump in?
Yeah, just gonna agree with all that was being said there, and just we made a decision within sustainability that we were gonna try to focus on the Green Zone Summit as our sort of contribution to the Community Connections Conference. So we've, as Leslie has said, got a number of staff people already kind of engaged on that, and it's going to be a fairly robust series of meetings and roundtables. So we are not planning to have a table there for a similar reason, just having the capacity to do that. But if there was a strong desire to do that, we certainly would be open to it. But we decided to put our efforts into that Green Zone Summit for this year.
Perfect. Cool. I think so. Based on this conversation, it sounds like the best use of SEAC members' time in that conference might be to mark your calendars now and plan to attend if you're able to. Nick and Aaron, are your hands up again or from before?
From before, I forgot.
Okay. Cool.
I have a separate heads up topic if we're done with this one.
Yeah, go for it.
The talking about the North Side Green Zone reminded me something that we discussed at SEAC a long time ago. Was a MnDOT project for Highway 252 that was originally planned to include additions of lanes on I-94 through North Minneapolis. And I happened to hear a little birdie mention that there will be a new round of engagement coming for that project. But it sounds like MnDOT has made some pretty significant changes to what will show up in the city. It may not be a bad idea for us as SEAC to pay attention to that and to try to amplify the changes as positive if we see them as such.
Thanks, Nick. That's a good flag.
Do you think that was what Maddie? I know you had sent over some stuff. I haven't had a chance to look at it. Is that on the same topic?
That's not exactly what I sent. I sent the Rethinking I-94, but I think they're probably very related.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're two. I think they are related projects. They're pretty different stages. The 252 project has some money already identified, and it's really being shepherded primarily by a couple of the north suburban cities that want to see changes on the expressway portion of 252. So, you know, I don't know that their timelines necessarily match, even though the concepts behind it from the city's perspective are very similar.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Nick, for bringing that up, and thanks, Maddie, for that suggestion. If anyone, in the meantime, between now and the next meeting or anytime, has other ideas about topics that you want to discuss here, feel free to email me or Kim or Sandy or Bjorn. We're over time, so I'm going to hustle through to get us adjourned. Anything else to talk about before we head out? Oh, Tess.
Yeah, I was just going to note that I put in the chat earlier about an event coming up next week, next Wednesday, that the Green New Deal folks from MN350 and Just Transition Coalition are holding to launch their work related to the rethink of the Minneapolis Climate and Equity Action Plan, if folks are interested. And if you want to join the premiere of Food That Grows in Water right now, I put the links for, or the codes for that in too. Thanks.
Thanks, Tess. That's great. All right, not seeing any other hands, so we've completed our items on the agenda. Thanks everyone for participating. You can reach anyone or the Sustainability Office at sustainability@minneapolismn.gov. And if without objection, if I'm assuming we're not going to hear it, I'll declare this meeting adjourned, and our next SEAC meeting will be on April 12th, 2022 at 5 p.m. as a virtual online meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.